Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are Pat Flanders, the Chief Information Officer at the Defense Health Agency, Frank Konechny, the Chief Technology Officer at the Air Force, Jamie Markole, the Chief Information Officer at the Defense Contract Audit Agency, Don Means is the Defense Enclave Services Executive at the Defense Information Systems Agency, Danielle Metz is Principal Director for the Deputy Chief Information Officer for Information Enterprise at the Defense Department, and Doug Jones is the Chief Technology Officer of the Defense Group at Leidos. It's good to have you all here. And our subject today is the consolidation of IT in the Fourth Estate, a big and important and somewhat difficult initiative that the Defense Department has undertaken. And so to get a kind of an overview of what it is that DoD hopes to accomplish with this, why don't we start with you, Danielle, from the DoD standpoint, and what's going on here?
Thanks, Tom. So we prefer to, instead of calling it consolidation, call it optimization. And the goal is to address the challenges that have been present for a very long time regarding tens of thousands of applications that are scattered amongst 2,500 data centers, 40 multiple independently owned operated networks, silos of excellence. There's lack of interoperability. Cyber hygiene is awash in terms of it being a patchwork. And so in order to be able to address these challenges, the focus for IT reform is really three lines of effort. The first is network and service optimization. The second is cloud and data center optimization. And both of those lines of effort are really focused on our DAFAs, the Defense Agency Field Activities. We group them into phases, so there's three phases. The first phase has 14 organizations. The second phase is those DAFAs that receive their services from the joint service provider. And then the third phase is our EDU community. The last line of effort is enterprise collaboration IT tools. And this is really beyond the DAFAs. So this is covering from an enterprise approach, collaboration, office suite productivity. So what I would like to focus on are the first two, because we've made some incredible headway over the past year and a half, and FY20 is the year of execution. So the way that we've done this is the first 14 organizations, two of which are a part of the panel today, so it'd be really good to hear their viewpoint. But we worked really hard in terms of creating a collaborative environment in order for everyone to have a stake and see how we would be defining and going about optimization for the networks. So right now there's 30 independent networks, and what we're trying to do is consolidate, optimize into two. So there'll be one classified and one unclassified. Also the optimization of about 35 service desks to one. And the idea is that DISA would be the single service provider for common use IT. And we're very prescriptive in terms of being able to delineate between common use IT and mission IT. And the idea is with common use IT, from the desktop to the enterprise, DISA would be responsible for that. And so therefore there is contracting, acquisition, lifecycle management, the operations, and a consolidation of workforce so that those current IT professionals that provide the service desk help support for those individual 13 organizations will now be consolidated for DISA. And so we are really changing the paradigm in terms of what we mean by IT. And it's really not driven by cost efficiency as it is for operational effectiveness. And if we're able to do this over the past, starting in FY20 to go through 25, this is transformational in of itself, but this could be a blueprint for the rest of the department to follow suit. We've always talked about it. It's been very theoretical and philosophical, but now we're actually doing it. I'm incredibly thrilled to be able to be a part of this.
Okay, and why don't we turn to Frank here, speaking from one of the armed services standpoints that would presumably benefit. Just briefly, what do you think you're hoping to get out of this as you watch your fellow service agencies do this?
We're actually very dependent upon these agencies. And I'll give you a case in point that we're going through right now. It's the Air Force audit. FM audit and everything else, to the real property with real bills, associating real property with the purchase requisitions and everything else. And what is real property in terms of IT centers, as well as weapons, as well as ammo, as well as everything else. And we are looking back and forth and saying, well, we need data. We need data desperately to coordinate this and make sure that the audit is successful. And we've been doing this now for 3 years now. And so we would like to be able to collaborate much better with all the agencies, as well as have them in a more of an environment where it's cloud-based, that we can actually get to the systems and the data that we actually need. So we are really dependent upon them right now, and our audit depends upon it getting done. So we are very happy, let's put it that way, that the fourth estate is actually getting to that point, because we are really dependent. And if we can't get that done, we're going to fail our audit.
All right, and audit brings to mind Jamie Markole, the Chief Information Officer at the Defense Contract Audit Agency. Jamie, tell us what you think some of the risks and challenges are for the agency as you become part of this larger whole from an IT standpoint.
Okay, the largest concern that we have at the agency level is the potential loss of individual flexibility. And what I mean by that is, first of all, we're a big fan of the fourth estate nation. I think it's going to be a great thing at end state, because it will allow us that remain at the agency to focus on our mission IT at the exclusion of the common use IT. But the concern we have is maybe a prioritization thing. Right now, for instance, at DCAA, we run our own network, soup to nuts. And so when our agency leadership has a change in priorities, we can be pretty nimble and responsive and focus our IT resources to adapt to whatever that priority change is. Once we transition to being basically a customer of the fourth estate service provider, then we are one of many customers, and I suspect that response time could be slowed down. And so that's what we're concerned about, is being able to still get our needs met, especially in the event of like a service outage or some type of problem. So how the fourth estate puts in place a governance structure that allows for rapid escalation of agency priorities, that'll be very important for us for this to be a success from our viewpoint.
Got it. And Don Means at DISA, tell us what your concerns are. DISA has, kind of a wide-ranging role in providing services now to DoD.
Well, Jamie touched on one of our primary concerns. We want to make sure that we're enabling all these missions. The commodity IT and being the single service provider for commodity IT, I think we can do. It's something that's in DISA's wheelhouse and something I'm very happy to be part of. I think in a lot of ways, we will be able to be more proactive and preventative to kind of alleviate some of Jamie's concerns. But the challenge here is that every single activity and agency has a unique mission. And we'll have to work very closely with the CIOs and the directors of each one of these agencies to make sure that we are considering every facet of the job that they're trying to do and how we can enable their mission IT through the commodity IT infrastructure. In a lot of ways, being a single service provider may streamline some of the response times and processes, as well as be more proactive and preventative.
Got it. So DISA would be kind of the catch point for all of this when this consolidation takes place down the road?
Yeah, absolutely. We will be responsible for end-to-end operation. It's a little different for DISA. We in most cases have provided infrastructure, not all the way out to the endpoint, outside of the agency. So this will be an interesting facet, but certainly doable. And we'll be able to provide a new infrastructure that will provide a more discoverable and network that we'll be able to command and control better, provide better cybersecurity and better responsiveness. And so it'll be fun, but the challenges are there certainly to enable every mission.
And Pat, at the Defense Health Agency, you've got a couple of projects. You've got this overlaid with the health records, which is a long-term, fairly heavy lift project also where there's been some progress in the last couple of years. Tell us what you see as the challenges here and maybe some of the risks.
I think the biggest risk is to not do it, right? I mean, when the Secretary of Defense has an IT problem and he turns to the Army, he knows who to give the mission to fix, right? The G6 of the Army. Same with the Navy. When you come to the fourth estate, there's a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of phone calls you got to make, right? And so that's the biggest risk. We've got to kind of align better. And our fearless leader is Danielle Metz and Don. And, you know, we're attached at the hip on this. You know, it's a time phase thing. We work out the problems together. And, you know, I'm towards the end of the time phasing because I'm in the middle of transitioning treatment facilities from the services onto my network. But wherever we can take advantage of strategic sourcing and contracts and things like that, we're doing it.
Yeah, you're sort of where a lot of things are consolidating, and then you in turn have to consolidate your infrastructure. So that's a challenge. It's good to be Pat, I guess, these days. And
I'm not bored.
And Doug Jones at Leidos often, you know, like the media, the large vendors sometimes have the best view across agencies and maybe even more knowledge than they have of one another. What does it look like from your standpoint at this point? What, from Leidos' standpoint, do you see as the top risks here?
I think there's two. One is really a little bit of what Jamie talked about is how do you make sure you have a service offering that meets the needs across where some of those needs are slightly different? So how do you find the center of that Venn diagram and give some flexibility around the edges to support those mission pieces and get that sort of tailoring? I think the other is going to be the migration approach, because you know we're all starting at different spots, and how we do this successfully to make sure we're achieving those outcomes and keeping that momentum going and the benefits we're going to get out of this, while you know maintaining that balance to make sure the mission is being supported, especially in this ever-changing dynamic world we live in today.
Okay, and I wanted to ask you, Danielle, to follow up on something you said, that 2020 is the year of implementation, and yet it's a 5-year effort. And so what are your immediate goals? Because we're well into fiscal 2020, difficult as that has become for a lot of reasons outside of anybody's control.
Right, so for the Fourth Estate Network optimization effort, DTIC is our first customer that this is working with. Before the pandemic, the idea was that we would start doing their migrations for their network and their civilian transfer starting now, and that we would be in FOC for DTIC in August. Due to the fact that we are at kind of at a maximum telework, a lot of the work that we would have to do is in person. That's introduced a lot of schedule delay. But we are still working with DTIC. We're doing a virtual town hall with their workforce next Thursday. And even though that the schedule is slipping from the network migration piece, we feel confident that we'll be able to start later in the summer. We just won't hit the marks that we were hoping to hit before. So really DTIC and DIS are the first ones to go. FY21, we had 3 or 4 more organizations that would be rolling. So as Pat said, this is a very phased approach. There's 13 organizations. We're staggering them out up through FY25 for the first 14 organizations. And
strikes me as, I was going to say, this sounds a little bit similar to the effort a number of years ago to overhaul the Pentagon from an IT standpoint, when they, and actually from a physical standpoint, also they went wedge by wedge.
Yes.
In that sense, you're going wedge by wedge over a 5-year period.
That's right. A lot of it is based on what Doug was saying earlier, is that you have to have a methodical approach to this. I wish I had a magic wand so I could just wave it and it'd be done, but we have to be respectful of the fact that, as everyone has mentioned, there's specific mission needs, and we need to make sure that we're doing no harm to that as we gracefully transition to this new network.
And of course, Don, DISA has a lot of experience in transitioning from networks to networks, generations to generations. Sound like a doable piece to you? And do you think the schedule over the 5 years is, I mean, what'll it take to make sure that, given the delay, again, out of anyone's control that's going on now, this can be righted so that you're going to get those full 5 years and get it done?
Yes, absolutely. I think we'll be able to get this done. You know, we, as Danielle mentioned, you know, we are moving forward with the personnel transfer. We're doing as much of the infrastructure setup as we can. We are limited. Freedom of movement isn't what it was several months ago with some things like site surveys. But on the back end, there's still a lot of work that we can do and make progress. I think, it's not going to be a problem to continue to do the work. And since DISA is kind of one of the first guinea pigs, we're more than happy to do the work here to be able to set up and enable the rest of the transition.
And just a quick follow-up, what do you do to convince the agencies as part of that are part of this, that DISA is not simply going to make everyone look like DISA, but that they'll have a say and get that kind of flexibility they need?
Well, again, I think it requires a close partnership with the agencies and, building trust with them as we work through them. It's through an abundance of communication back and forth and to making sure that we're hand in glove with each agency, because every single one of them, they are unique. Where Pat may be trying to enable a medical community with things like, everything from baby monitors to COVID first responders, it's not less important than what Jamie's doing to being able to audit and administer contracts. And so it just requires a close partnership to understand, in the end game and at the end point, what do we need to make sure that we need to do to make sure that we're enabling their work, because it's important to everybody, as Frank mentioned.
All right, good place to take a break on. I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. This panel discussion is Digital Modernization in DoD's Fourth Estate, sponsored by Leidos, here on Federal News Network.